Great. I'd like to call the Comox Valley Regional District Board meeting of Tuesday, September 15th, 2020 to order. We'll start with the recognition that we're on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. And today we are going to read from the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 17. Indigenous individuals and peoples have the right to enjoy fully all rights established under applicable international and domestic labor law. States shall, in consultation and cooperation with Indigenous peoples, take specific measures to protect Indigenous children from economic exploitation and from performing any work that is likely to be hazardous or to interfere with the child's education or to be harmful to the child's health or physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development, taking into account their special vulnerability and the importance of education for their empowerment. And Indigenous individuals have the right not to be subjected to any discriminatory conditions of labor and inter alia, employment, or salary. And with that, we have a motion for in camera to begin at the end of this meeting. Thank you. And that is to do with 91C, labor relations, and 91E, acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land. Is there anyone opposed to going in camera following the regular meeting? Seeing none, that's carried. And we're on to adoption of minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Those are Regional District Board minutes from August 25th. Any comments or questions on the minutes? All in favor of adoption? Anyone opposed? Those are carried. And we're on to reports. And we have a Climate Action Community Grant Program report. Thank you. And we have two speakers today. I'll pass it to staff to introduce.
Thank you very much, Chair and Directors. And yes, Brianne Lemieux is on the line, our staff member who will describe the report and answer any of your questions. And she will be supported by the consultant from GHG as well.
Great. Thank you, Russell, through the chair to the directors. Just quickly want to note, we just came off our first Airshed Roundtable meeting, 3-hour meeting. So it's really encouraging to see that get off the ground. And that's not what I'm presenting on today, but we're excited. A long time coming. So more updates on that to come. So in terms of the Climate Action Community Granting Program, you may recall that I was presenting to you back in May when we were talking about different options to purchase verified carbon offsets in order to meet our commitment to be carbon neutral for our 2019 carbon emissions. And we went ahead and purchased the offsets that the board did recommend. And then the other thing we noted is that we still would have money left over in the budget, our 2019 carbon offset budget, about $31,000. And we wanted to further explore doing a community granting program, but we needed a little bit more time to dig into it. So what's happened since then is we have issued an expression of interest just to kind of gauge interest at the marketplace to see if there are other organizations out there that could support us in this endeavor, realizing that it might be a little bit outside of staff expertise to fully develop this granting program from the ground up. And as a result of that, we did receive a submission from GHG Accounting in partnership with Low Carbon Fund. And they had a number of really interesting ideas about running the grant program kind of as a competition, but also a big focus on capacity building, like recognizing that some of our community projects are still in their infancy and they might need a little bit of support to even get to the stage where they're applying for some funding. So that was a component of it. And then also utilizing the virtual world to support different community groups and making applications. And if they were awarded funding, and then also having a local selection jury as well. So that was the one marketplace response that we did receive. And as I said, it resulted in a number of good ideas that we hadn't actually thought about yet. And what we envision as staff for this is that the grant program would run for a period of 1 year, but certainly there's opportunity once it's off the ground, depending on board direction, to continue the granting program if we do have these leftover funds each year in the carbon offset budget. So at this stage, we are asking the board to be able to allocate up to $4,000 of the just over $31,000 budget for the granting program to go towards having consultants support us in the development and the administration of the program. And then a large majority, so more than 90% of the funds would go towards the actual grants themselves. So we are recommending that we proceed with negotiating, finalizing our agreement with GHG Accounting and the local carbon fund based on their response to our expression of interest. And luckily, Sven Anderson from GHG Accounting has agreed to be here today if the board wants to ask any questions about this potential granting program, or even more broadly about measuring community emissions or some other topics that have come up recently. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the staff report, and then Sven Anderson is here to answer any questions that would relate to his area of expertise.
Director Frisch, have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I just had a process question. Would we then be getting a report back sort of showing what this granting, sorry, I'm lost for words, this grant program would look like then? Is that what the next step would be for us to see that?
We could absolutely do that. As you can see, there's not a lot of meat on the bones yet, because the part that staff identified we could really use some external support for is the actual development of the grant program. So what that program would look like. So certainly that could be our next report out to the board, is what the program design would be, if that's desired.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and I have a million questions, but I think actually they'll probably be answered as you move through that process. So really looking forward to this. Thanks so much.
Director Kamir.
Thank you. And thanks to staff for even exploring this idea. I think it's fantastic. And I just did a quick calculation, 4%, 4,000 of 31K, I think is well within most fees that management services, charge for administration of funds like this. It's not a large amount. And so question is either to staff or to Sven. Can you see, are there any other options for outside sources of funding to come in, both either from the province or from federal, that could be used to match some of these dollars? Have you seen any other jurisdictions do something like that?
If that's all right, I'd like to divert to Sven on this one. We did have a bit of a conversation of potential funding opportunities for the projects themselves that initially got awarded grants. So maybe not to add more money to the initial pocket of grant funding that we then administer, but once projects are kind of off the ground, there could be some opportunity for them to be assisted in applying for funding. So Sven, if you wanted to speak to that at all, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll be happy to address this point. Yes, that is a very important aspect of the proposal that we provided in response to this request, is that we will make the utmost effort to channel additional fundings to the project itself. We will also provide complementary capacity building to the project itself, and those capacity buildings will hopefully enable participants in this to be empowered to qualify for funding opportunities and be involved in funding applications. So we are a community contribution company, and will add additional value to this process by the capacity building, as well as pointing to additional granting opportunities.
Great, thank you. I just want to point out that under the Ministry of Agriculture, the ministry has a climate action initiative. And Vancouver Island just finished its climate adaptation plan. So there are some funds available, which usually, require a small amount of local dollars to be then matched by 3 or 4 times from the province. That if those types of projects fit within the guidelines of whatever you set, that there's an opportunity to potentially tap into some of those funds if a project matched both funding opportunities. So thank you.
Thanks. I don't see any further questions, but I do have one. So this is regarding the motion before us today regarding the carrot program and the extra funds that we have after we have accounted for our own corporate emissions. But I've been in a number of discussions with community groups, including the Comox Valley Nurses for the Environment, who are interested in the regional district doing broader GHG accounting for the community. And I was wondering, because we have an expert on the line in greenhouse gas accounting, what sort of direction do you think we could go with this to get to that place of broader community accounting? Vancouver and Squamish, some other municipalities like that have sort of dashboard where they're keeping a running tally of their greenhouse gas emissions and how the different decisions affect those. So I'm just wondering if you see us leading into that with this motion today, or is there another way that we could head in that direction?
That's a very, very good aspect to be also considered. Just as a way of background, we are actually providing greenhouse gas accounting services to the government itself. So we actually administer and provide the services to the BC government's carbon neutral government program, as well as to the majority of all cities and municipalities within BC to help them to account for their emissions reporting, as well as their submission to the CARB report, as well as some of the municipalities' commitment to account for their community emissions. We would definitely have that aspect in mind due to our background and work to consider those impacts. And part of the capacity building, it would be our impetus, so to speak, to make people aware of their contributions within those frameworks. So if you are suggesting a project to divert unused food items, for example, which we have done for the city of Surrey's food project, for example, they were very interested to learn. So how does it contribute to the emission reductions within our community? And that was in fact a very important part for their funders to understand that, and also for their project to place themselves as a community group doing a contribution to the community, and then be able to qualify and express, we are actually with our project lowering emissions by X amount of percentage through our actions. That empowered the project to an amazing extent, that it will also enable them to communicate to their stakeholders how significant their impact was. And it was also a learning opportunity for them to see, wow, actually, what we're doing every day here in our volunteering work is actually contributing to lower the overall emissions within our community. So I think you're pointing to an important aspect there. And we definitely, our intention to provide insights for participants to gain that insight and understanding. And if you ask me, like, is there other measures that you can take? The answer would be yes. Moving strategically forward to account for your community emissions, which is also an aspect within the Climate Action Charter, of course, I think would be a good idea. And there are recommended ways of how to do this. Our recommendation is to focus on your area of influence. There are varying approaches available to account for community emissions. Our recommendations, that's echoed by the province and their tools, is that you focus on yours of area of influence and governance. So you have an influence on land use, you have an influence on zoning, on permits, and there you can make a difference, versus you have limited influence of what kind of clothes people buy in your jurisdictions, or some other purchasing decisions they make. You can provide education, yes, but usually all the tools that the province has put out and all the cool toolkits are all designed around area of influence. And so therefore our recommendation would be to follow that framework and apply that same idea and concept towards your community emissions and relate them to your area of influence, and then also justify and account for your decisions based on that process. And that will also then be reflected in your community action granting program as a framework, saying we are putting this framework out because it will lower emissions in our community, and our intention will be to support it in exactly that way to show how this program is contributing to that goal.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers your
Yes,
question.
thank you for your input.
Director Kettler, may I add to that? In terms of this motion and this project that we're proposing, I think what it's really helped highlight is over the years, we've suggested a number of projects to the board that could reduce our community emissions, but the true missing link is understanding what the baseline of our community emissions actually are.
Right.
And certainly we've been able to access some provincial data over the years that has some challenges and really isn't updated very regularly anymore. So we do, I think what is being highlighted through these different projects we're bringing forward is the need for that baseline, and then we can use that to influence and help us make decisions about what future projects we'd be able to bring forward. So I just wanted to note that staff is exploring different approaches and possible external help to start to look at measuring community emissions, and that will likely come up through the strategic planning sessions and in budgeting conversations for next year.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brianne. I believe David Frisch has, or Director Frisch has another comment.
Dave's got a comment. Well, no, I just wanted to thank you, Chair, for bringing that up, and for staff and the consultant for weighing in a little bit on it. I do think it's really important that we start looking at tracking our GHG emissions, and that's going to make our decision process a lot easier, especially in regards to this granting program, so that we can say, you know, this is directly linked to what's going on in the valley, and this grant's going towards ameliorating that situation. So thank you very much.
Okay, no further questions, and we're still on receipt. Anyone opposed to receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. Thank you very much to Brianne and Sven. Thank you. And the recommendation is that staff be authorized to negotiate and finalize a one-year agreement with GHG Accounting / Local Carbon Fund to establish a climate action community granting program at a cost of up to $4,000 drawn from the $31,170 of granting program budget. Any further comments, questions? All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And we are on to bylaws and resolutions. So the first one is for first and second reading of bylaw 622, the Comox Valley Water Conservation Bylaw. Any comments, questions? Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. I'm just curious about, is this bylaw, I noted the changes that are in the document that was provided. Is this taking into consideration any of the feedback after the stage 4 water restrictions in terms of businesses? It's just very timely because I had business owner contact me this week who's really concerned about the restrictions, particularly with COVID impacting his business and not being able to operate his window washing business, basically. And there are apparently only 12 window washers in town. So I just was curious about that there are some significant impacts to businesses in addition to what some of them experienced during the stage 4. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Morton. Through the chair to the board. Yes, this amendment does stem from the leak under the Pontledge River and the subsequent engagement with the business community. The report to the board or to the committee went forward a number of months ago. So now the amendment, amending bylaws coming forward. I'd be pleased to speak with you after the meeting, I guess, about the specific concerns of the individual. But generally, again, this amendment seeks to update the bylaw with more plain language. That was one of the recommendations, and also address a number of other items that was part of the report that came forward from the consultant.
a follow-up. Yeah, it appears as though the piece around hygiene for animals and dogs is more generic now, so that dog groomers would be okay. Yeah, maybe I'll chat with you later about that. I just, I'm just wondering about during COVID, we've already got so many impacts to businesses. You know, how this sort of sits with that. It's a significant amount of money that people are losing if they can't wash windows when that's their only source of income. Thanks.
Thank you. So this is a vote of the areas and Courtney and Comox. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, for third reading, all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. And we're on to bylaw number 623, the Comox Valley Regional District Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw. Thank you. So that's for first and second, and it's vote of the full board. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. And for third reading, all in favor? Anyone opposed? That's also unanimous. And we're on to final adoption of bylaw 619, the Rural Comox Valley Zoning Bylaw 520.
Move adoption.
Any discussion? And this is a vote of the areas. All in favor? And that's unanimous. And we actually have one item under new business. And it was a correspondence from TELUS regarding connectivity for the rural areas.
Move the recommendation. Gotta move the agenda first.
That is the recommendation for the agenda. Okay. Thank you. So you got a first and second, Director Fish, second. Okay. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. And I will turn it over to Director Grieve to speak to the correspondence.
Thank you very much. At last week's meeting of FCM, the rural-urban divide around connectivity and high-speed internet access is glaring. I've got actually, you know, it's serious when the president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta comes out and says this has to change. So that's about the closest thing we have to Texas. But Al Kamir said that with regards to rural Alberta and I guess it applies to rural northern BC as well, that we continually bring this up and talk about it. It's been a topic conversation at countless FCM meetings. It's very ironic that a lot of these convention centers are named after Rogers and Shaw and TELUS, and yet for some reason, there's no money to do this. He said that time has come, that it's not just communication. It's absolutely essential for commerce and business. It's absolutely essential now for education, especially that became apparent with the COVID lockdowns. And it's now at the point where what he said was that broadband is now basic, like water, like wastewater. And we need to get some comprehensive legislation in place to make it mandatory across Canada. This is a small government kind of a organization where they aren't usually prone to make these kind of big statements. But it's and the West, the Western Economic Strategy said as well that high-speed ghettos across the West are making it impossible for people to be on a level playing field. So although we're going to receive this letter from TELUS, staff have also cautioned me in the fact that some of the language in there kind of favors TELUS, obviously, as if it was a Shaw letter, it would favor Shaw. But the crux of the matter is that we, as duly elected officials, local government, are really going to have to start rattling our swords here to the federal and provincial governments. Enough of allowing these companies to take vast amounts of money monthly out of our municipalities and our communities, and yet plead poverty when it comes to extending high-speed internet into some of the outlying areas, and not even, we're not talking about extending them to Haines Junction or something. We have areas here in the Comox Valley, just north of the Puntledge River, the corridor, Dove Creek, and the Piercy Road, Plateau Road area. That's prime example. So although I wouldn't recommend the board take any action on this, I do think we should look to resolutions that come forward at FCM in the coming week and support it as much as possible. We need to perhaps write a letter from the board to the government, to the federal government, saying in no small terms that this is a serious flaw, a serious gap in Canada, and we have to, at this point, make it so that this is guaranteed. It's a basic right. It's not up to for-profit groups to cherry pick and look after the major municipalities that can make major amount of money. This has to be universal. So it's going to take some kind of senior government action to make it happen. So in closing, I would just say, let's make sure that we let our associations know, AVICC, FCM, UVCM, as well as perhaps writing a letter from this body to reiterate the seriousness of the gap. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Director. And now we have Director Kamir.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to my colleague for bringing this forward. It is really important, and especially in a time of COVID when health and schooling is all connected to the internet, it's essential. My one concern is in the letter, the letter that was provided as an example, I didn't see First Nations communities highlighted. And so if we're saying the essentiality of broadband for life in both for rural and urban Canada, I just want to point out that we should also include First Nations communities and that they have that right as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for bringing this forward. I guess I'm wondering how big of an issue this is for our rural areas. It sounds like it is for yours, and I didn't hear you specifically say how it is at your house, but I see Daniel Arbors on the line next up, so he's making those eyes at me too. So I'd love to hear, because I actually have pretty good internet connection in Courtenay, but love to hear if the situation is different out of town.
Director Arbor.
So my question is, echoing Dr. Grievous, it's frustrating because are we going to deal with a topic like that every 3 meetings? Because we had Shaw, we had TELUS, we have a project on Hornbeat that's been trying to getting going and Denman as well to bring high-speed internet. We have Strathcona Regional District with their Connected Coast project. It's hard to get traction with the oligopoly, I tell you. So when I see a letter like that from them that doesn't seem to be in the spirit of their own action and their own role in enhancing service, as Director Grieve rightfully highlighted, and they're asking us to be partner to beg for more money from the government. This is tiring. I think we could send a letter and maybe we could bring it back to ESC, or I don't know, because it is mostly a rural issue. I think that the municipalities are not as concerned about high-speed internet. But maybe if we did send a letter, it would be perhaps to counter some of the TELUS points and still encourage the government to invest, but perhaps not in the way that TELUS suggests. And for the government to put a bit more pressure on those big oligopolies to invest in a way that's more equitable. So I'm just tired of the issue. You know, it was really disappointing last month that we hit some snags after getting ICT grants and all the rest and doing a roadmap for Hornby and Denman for high connectivity, and then finding out that the pots of money from the feds have exhausted, that we would have to put the project in competition with other things here. And yeah, I know the committees that have been working very hard, volunteer committees on the islands are quite saddened. So I think Director Grieve is right. It's been all talk and no money. You know, they've declared it a basic right, and there's no backing from the government and no collaboration with the oligopolies to make it happen. So I would definitely not sign this letter, but I would, if we have the inclination, support us considering the next action, because I don't know what the next action should be. Thank you.
Well, the letter that that they sent had a template in it and specific wording and a specific request that we are not, that was not put forward by staff as a recommendation, but we did alter that request basically to our own wording so that it's not specific to any one telecom company. And I think the other thing we all can do, as Director Grieve mentioned, is vote for the resolutions that are coming forward to UBCM and FCM. I think there's 3 resolutions this year regarding this issue going to UBCM. So that's probably the most effective way to get something done. But I think this letter and wording is pretty broad and doesn't necessarily favor any one company. So I think we're rather safe in that regard. So seeing no further comments or questions, does someone want to move the requested action?
Just received it.
We voted for the to consider the addendum. Yeah, and so we're on to. All in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? That's carried. And is there a motion for a letter, Director Grieve?
I guess it would be in way of direction to staff that we bring back a letter to the our next board meeting. Just basically reiterating some of the points that we raised here. And it doesn't have to be a long-winded thing because we know where which file it's going to end up in anyway. And but at least I think that it should show intent. I think as this happens across Canada, that they're going to have to sit up and take notice, because it's no longer, as I say, it's no longer a nice thing to have. It's an absolute essential to modern living. So if we could just maybe have staff come back with a proposed letter that's kind of curt, short, to the point.
So your motion is for staff to craft a letter and for it to come back to the board for review. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Director Frisch, do you want to speak to this motion?
Well, I was going to see if it would make sense to have it go back to the Electoral Areas Committee to review first and have them discuss it at that level, just because they seem to have a lot of insight into it. And I don't know if I'm just speaking for myself here, but it seems like a subject that I don't know a lot about and might not have a lot to add at this point.
Director Grieve, would you like to amend the motion to go to ESAC first? Director Hillian?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just a little bit unclear. Who are we writing to? Are we taking the letter suggested by TELUS and writing to the Prime Minister, or are we writing to TELUS and suggesting to them along the lines of what our Director Arbor indicated? I'm totally unclear about what the direction is to staff around to whom a letter is going. And I guess I'm also a little bit unclear what the point of a letter to the Prime Minister is if we have all sorts of resolutions coming up. And I've seen resolutions, this has been talked about at every conference I've been over a period of years. So I'm really not sure what the point of us writing a letter at this stage is.
Yeah, I think the idea that it go to the Prime Minister was to be included in his speech this week. That obviously is a little far-fetched, but I think that was the original intent that TELUS had. But I think staff would just, as it says in the request here, just write to the federal government. I don't know who's next. Director Grieve?
Thank you. If I may, if we look back to some of the previous letters we've sent from the board chair, and I would say it should come from the board chair because not the ASC. I think we need to be united in this. But we have sent letters in the past, and we've sent them to the communication ministers, provincial, federal, as well as the actual major providers out there as well. So it's a bit futile, I know, but it isn't going to hurt. And if everybody across Canada did it, I think they might just, we might see a little more action on it. So it's not just the Prime Minister, but mostly the communication ministers and the big broadband providers. That's what we've done in the past. I think 3 letters have gone out in my recollection.
Director Arbor?
Yeah, to my colleague, what I just realized is that at the last EASC, we did commit to continue to support the Hornby and Denman internet groups around their efforts, which is not necessarily letter writing. I think there's a strategizing that needs to happen for us if we're going to break through this. And I'm not sure we're clear on a strategy to support our rural communities from Black Creek to Hornby and Denman. So barring that, I would say let's just defer and do some thinking and let maybe put the I did have a meeting with one of the Denman folk, and he had some suggestions for how to move forward. So maybe staff could in the next couple of months have some of those discussions to think about what role do we play in that space and what's the best strategy to make sure that the more remote areas of the Comox Valley are properly serviced. So all I'm saying is maybe a letter will be the result of those conversations, maybe it won't. I don't know. So I would just defer that instead of creating work, unless there's a national campaign organized by the FCM, then I would say let's do it. But this, I think, came to us as a request from TELUS last minute. So I feel like the board doesn't have to do anything today. That's my sentiment.
Director Healy?
Thanks, Chair. If news reports are to be accepted as correct, the federal government's about to go into multi-billions of dollars in debt to launch all sorts of programs, including income security and others related to the pandemic. The federal government's well aware of the broadband issue. I think if they don't come forward with some plans to address it as part of the upcoming speech from the throne and spending package, it would be more appropriate to actually send letters to the opposition suggesting that they bring the government down if they don't include this as part of the package. And I mean, I'm not going to vote against a letter, but I honestly think it's a waste of our staff's time at this particular stage of proceedings.
Director Frisch?
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if process-wise, if the motion to refer it to the EAC it would be in line, or if just defeating it's
So
more.
the motion on the floor is still, as Director Grieve initially stated, to have staff craft a letter and to have it come back to this board for review,
Okay, and a motion to refer wouldn't apply at this point.
unless he wishes a friendly amendment.
I accept.
So for staff to craft a letter and for it to go back to.
No, I just
EASC.
wanted to refer the whole matter to the EAC. Is that allowed at this point?
We should probably vote on
Okay.
this then if that's.
Is that a whole new motion?
Well, the board owns the motion now.
Does Jake have any insight into the flow of?
Is that more than a friendly
motions?
meeting?
So the board could take a few options here. With the consent of the board, it could be withdrawn and then we start with a clean slate, or it could be referred by motion endorsed by the board to the EASC for consideration.
I'm just going to vote against it.
So the second option was to,
Refer the matter.
but what do we do with the, add the referral?
The matter.
Yeah.
Just be by
Okay,
resolution referred to the EASC.
okay,
Second.
okay. All in favor that it be referred to the ESC? Any opposed? Director Hillian? That's carried. Okay, thank you. And where are we now?
Media.
That's it. We're on to termination.
No. Moving camera.
Oh, yes. We've already made that motion to in camera, so we'll just stop.